but we're so excited to have you on, Brittney. This is going to be a great conversation.
Yeah.
Based on everything we've already talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
We keep running into this problem where we basically do like 1 to 2 pre-podcast podcasts where we're like, we should have just had that recording because there was so much good information that we shared.
Yeah. Just like always have a microphone in your pocket, just ready to go.
100%. And we were saying too, we've been really enjoying following you on Instagram, and we were almost like, okay, we have like an hour to talk with you, but there's so many different ways that we could take the conversation because you're a Gonstead Chiropractor, registered dietitian. You're doing amazing work helping women really optimize their hormone health and feel the best that they possibly can through nutrition and dietary inputs and things like that, which we find to be so important because we definitely have a male-centered audience, but we want to do more promotion on helping women optimize their health and feel the best that they possibly can. So I think as a starting point, I think just learning a little bit more about your story, who you are, what you do, and how you've gotten to the point where you are today would be an awesome spot to open it up.
Yeah, great. So yeah, I'll kind of start from the beginning of my nutrition journey. So I was always into health and fitness growing up, and then went right into undergrad into nutrition. When I was 19, I read a book that talked about going vegan and how great that is for your health and everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, like meat is terrible. How am I eating this? So went vegan for like a couple months, but then I really loved cheese and ice cream. So ate those. But then I was vegetarian for about 6 years. And it wasn't until, and during that time, I went through my undergrad nutrition, became a dietitian, was, vegetarian the whole time. They always preached like everything in moderation is fine. And like vegetarian diets can be healthy. And, I was learning all of that in my formal education. And then it wasn't until I was in chiropractic school and I was shadowing a doctor, and he has an undergraduate degree in, oh my gosh, I want to say biomechanics, biochemistry. I've been a chiropractor for too long. Biochemistry. So he was very knowledgeable in nutrition. And he had this theory that wrist injuries, like chronic wrist injuries, had to do with a zinc deficiency. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, what? Like, why would it only affect your wrists? Like, you're crazy. Brushed it off, didn't think anything of it. At the time, though, I was having wrist injuries. I was a yoga teacher, was doing a lot of yoga. My wrists were like not feeling great. I would get them adjusted. They still like weren't doing very well. So then a few months later, we're shadowing him again. And the topic came up again about zinc and wrist injuries. And I was still like, this really does not make any sense to me. But one of the best sources of zinc in your diet is red meat. And I had been vegetarian for 6 years. So I was like, well, what do I have to lose? I'll try it. Right. So I incorporated red meat back into my diet, and my wrists were so healthy after that.
Wow.
Yeah. Like they were totally fine. I would get them adjusted. They would hold their adjustment. Like I could do yoga again, and they like haven't been a problem since.
Just by eating red meat.
Yeah. Just by eating red meat again.
Was there anything else that you were noticing improving in your health other than just the wrists when you started incorporating red meat?
Yeah. Well, I immediately like gained healthy weight. I kind of like my muscle bulked up a bit more too, which was amazing. I had way more energy. At the same time, so I added meat back into my diet. I also went gluten-free. Then I guess I was sort of like paleo, I guess you could call it, for a year or two. And then that's when I discovered the carnivore diet, after like a year of being paleo. And then that's when I saw really big changes, was when I went full on carnivore. So when I incorporated red meat back in, I mean, I was still eating, I think I was eating red meat like once a day. I would just have it like in one meal per day, I would have red meat. But when I went full carnivore, that was an incredible shift. I did it strict for 30 days. And then after that, I've sort of, it's a little looser,
Right.
But strict for 30 days. And I mean, incredible energy. I used to be like narcoleptic after lunch, like I would just fall asleep. It was anything that I had to do after lunchtime in the afternoon. It was just a no-go.
So many people struggle with that.
Oh my gosh. It was so like my whole life. I just thought, I don't know what I thought. I was just like, oh, this sucks. Yeah. Like this is normal. People do this. Like I could be sitting front row in a class and I'm just like dozing off in front of the professor.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had consistent energy all throughout the day. I could go long stretches without eating and still like have energy. And I never became hangry. Like I was just always satisfied. I gained 10 pounds of muscle in like 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, it was wild, which was like good weight that I wanted to gain.
Yeah.
I was happy with that. So yeah, like really switching to carnivore is what made the biggest difference for me.
Do you still use it kind of as a tool, and then you're now like more focused on like animal based? Like how do you kind of define that? Because I feel like there's so much like ambiguity around, you know, the inputs, like what people are actually doing when they say carnivore diet.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I did it strict for about 30 days. And then ever since then, I've sort of been a little loose with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still gluten free. And now I would say what I do is probably like a combination of carnivore and pro-metabolic. So like a little bit of those. So it's mostly like a lot of meat, some fruit, a little bit of like, I might have rice occasionally or like some gluten-free bread, you know, here and there. Like raw carrots, I'll do those, but like I really just don't do that many vegetables because like why?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like no, they're not that good.
That's amazing, the transformation that, you know, starting out as a vegan, now you're saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's great. Like I used to force myself to eat vegetables because I thought they were so good for me. And I honestly never felt great eating them. I'd be so hungry after, you know, like a salad was never satisfying.
Totally. So many people feel that. It's like when you're 19, you're trying to do the right thing. You read this book. The arguments are very compelling. People don't want animals to die. And you're also being told that cutting out meat is the healthiest thing. But then when you're actually taking stock of how you feel lethargic, you feel bloated. I know we've had a number of women on that were formerly plant-based and just talked about like the way that their PMS symptoms improved and their fertility improved just by then reintroducing animal products into their diet. So it sounds like maybe some of that happened to you as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's crazy too. So I thought about this. So I was 19. It was probably 6 months after I went like vegan/vegetarian. I had the worst period cramps of my whole entire life. Like
Wow.
this had never happened before. I woke up one morning. I remember it specifically because I had a job interview for 24-hour fitness that day. And it was like my dream job. I wanted to work there so bad. And I had my job interview that day. And I woke up. I was on the bathroom floor, like just laid out on the floor. Wasn't sure if I was going to puke or like poop my pants. Like so just writhing in pain, like
Oh my gosh.
chugging children's Motrin, you know, just like doing whatever I could. So bad. And then fortunately they like it lasted for I don't know an hour or two, but they cleared up in time that I like made my job interview and I got the job. But that was, and it's so interesting is I didn't even correlate that with the fact that I had gone vegan 6 months prior until like this year. I thought about that, and that was
Yeah.
over 10 years ago.
Yeah. And so you went carnivore. You did that 30-day experiment in 2018.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yep.
And how do you feel overall about just women in the carnivore diet experimenting with that? Because it seems like that's kind of like a contentious topic, right? We've heard about that too.
Yeah.
Of like certain women think that it's great, they can thrive on carnivore. And then there's also certain women that think that they need to introduce some carbs, maybe like depending on where they are in their cycle. I don't know all the science behind it, but I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really interesting. There is a lot of debate amongst the community about all of that stuff. So I think that the amount of carbs that you can consume, especially like as a woman. So speaking as a woman, like men, you guys can get away with so much more, like so much more. We're much more complicated.
Yeah.
So this is one of those areas where I think women or like people in general truly differ in what they can consume. So like a lot of people out there are like, everybody's different diets work for everybody. And they say that to justify like vegetarian works and carnivore works and vegan works. I don't think that's the truth. I think all humans, we're the same species, we're the same animal. We need animal foods in our diet to thrive. But when it comes to the amount of carbs that we consume, that's where I feel like it is a little bit different, because there are women who have been on a completely strict carnivore diet for decades and their hormones are great, right? They have normal, regular periods. There's women who have healed their fertility that way and they're doing amazing. And then there's also women who say that they went keto or carnivore and it completely wrecked their hormones and they did not do well. So that's one of those areas where I think the carnivore diet is really, really fantastic to be used as a reset. Like I used to do more like carnivore diet coaching online when I first started in the online space. And even then when I was teaching the carnivore diet, I still taught it as a reset. So I did like a 30-day program with people. And then at the end of that, I taught them how to reintroduce foods. I think it's the most pure form of an elimination diet. A lot of elimination diets out there are so complicated. It's like, this is a list of fruits you can have, and this is a list of fruits you can't, and vegetables and nuts and seeds, and it's very confusing. Carnivore diet is really easy. If it doesn't come from an animal, you don't eat it.
Right.
Do that for 30 days and see how you feel. So I think in that aspect, it's really great to use as an elimination diet. If you have a lot of like mystery symptoms, or if you've been to a bunch of doctors and they can't figure out what's going on with you, whether it's autoimmune, whether it's your hormones, anything like that, just go carnivore for 30 days. 99.99% of people tolerate that really, really well. Like most people can digest red meat. Most people are not intolerant to red meat. They do really great on that. So give it 30 days and then you can start reintroducing foods. And I would start with fruit. Like fruit is going to be one of the most benign things. So like meat and fruit, if you just have those in combination, like use that as your carbohydrate source, I think that's a really great way to go about it. And then women can kind of experiment. So that's what I teach now. So now my online coaching is focused more towards hormonal health and helping women with their hormones. So I still teach an animal-based diet for them, but it's also like figure out what works for you. You know, try eating like a bunch of fruit one day and see how you feel, or try going completely carnivore for a week and see how you feel. And then you can kind of figure out what your personal carb tolerance is.
Interesting.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. Figure out what works for you. And we love that concept. We're all about the idea of experimenting, just learning for yourself to develop some form of intuition around food. Because to be honest, there's so many things that are disrupting our frequency in terms of understanding what's fueling us and giving us that energy. Coffee maybe being one of them. People eat a lot of processed foods. They have, tastes good. You get a sugar rush, but then you feel like crap later. So I think that like getting back to like real foods, as you said, and then focusing on what actually works, these nutrient dense foods, is such a powerful and easy message. Do you see a lot of people having success quickly with that?
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the crazy things too. So with intuitive eating, it is so powerful. And like for me personally, even going through my dietetic education and everything, I learned about intuitive eating and all of this. And I was never truly able to do that until I went carnivore, because you can't intuitively eat potato chips. You can't intuitively eat Oreos, right? Like these foods are made to override our natural senses. And so I was always honestly a carb fiend. And that's where I love the carnivore diet, because it really taught me how much better I feel with real food, which comes from red meat, and real nutrition. Because if left to my own devices, I would eat carbs all day long and I wouldn't eat meat.
Totally.
Because I just don't feel, I just don't crave like the savory foods or like the savory taste. And I'd be totally fine eating carbs all the time, but I feel like crap when I do that.
Yeah.
And so if I know that red meat needs to be like the basis of my meal or my diet, and I eat that first, then I can intuitively eat a side of mashed sweet potatoes with it, or, a side of whatever the carb is. I'm going to truly eat what my body needs of that and not eat too much of it if I were to start with the carbs, for example.
Let's take a minute to talk about some of the sponsors and brands who support the show.
Who are you thinking?
I was thinking about Carnivore Bar. What are your thoughts on Carnivore Bar?
I mean, it's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable product. We were lucky enough to have the founder, Philip Meese, on the show a few months ago, and he was able to send us a bunch of product when we started the relationship and absolutely loved it. I mean, it's minimum ingredient product, beef, tallow, salt, and then they do have a honey flavored option as well. But it's so nice to have a bar that's like 3 to 4 ingredients. And like when you're following a carnivore diet, it's really tough to find products that are in line with that specific diet,
Yeah, for me, it kind of hits like the holy trinity of what you're looking for when you're looking for food. So it's nutrient dense, it's convenient, and it tastes great. And as you said, most people who are trying to eat healthy, the convenience factor is kind of a tough part. So just being able to have something you can grab on the go, know that you're going to have that nutrition for the day, it's huge.
Yeah, and we were lucky enough, we got to actually see their factory too in Missouri, and they're just doing things the right way. I love how they offer an option for like carnivore purists where it's just beef, tallow, salt. And then they also have an animal-based option too. If you do want a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of variety, they have the honey in that option. And they're just people that are doing things the right way. They're very mission focused. They're carnivores themselves. And, we're always on the go. We're traveling. We've taken a bunch of flights together. To have a bar that has 30 grams of fat too, like that's huge from an energy density standpoint, right?
Yeah, he checks all the boxes, or the company checks all the boxes. And I just think the fact that they're sourcing from a regenerative farm as well, and Joyce Farms, just a win-win.
100%. The Carnivore Bar. So we got the affiliate link, and then it's code MAFIA for 10% off.
And then another one of our sponsors, one of our favorite farms, Holy Cow. What they're doing at Holy Cow is pretty remarkable. The relationships that they've built in the industry and how long they've been doing the grass-fed, grass-finished regenerative model is really innovative. They were one of the first people to be doing that and supplying whole foods early on. Just a great community farm, and also just product is something that speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think number one, to your point, Harry, they're just incredible people. We got to hear them speak at the Beef Initiative conference in Colorado. We had never met them before, but just hearing Warren's story where they were following a standard American diet, he had had a heart attack, and they were just looking for answers of like, how can we actually get healthier? Do I need to be dependent on medication? And they started changing their diets to incorporating more animal foods, and he completely reversed those symptoms of his stroke. And now they're just doing things the right way. They're grass finishing their beef. They're incorporating incredible practices. They have great relationships with the animals, and they're very passionate about just like connecting directly with the customer and also educating their customer on grass finished beef.
Yeah, and I think the best part is too, they're shipping nationally and trying to reach a bigger audience. So being able to not only supply beef nationally, but also educate people on the quality of good, clean, whole foods is just, it's an incredible mission.
How much do you love their beef bacon, by the way? I know that's your go-to.
Dude, it's one of the best things I've ever tasted.
It's that good.
No, honest to God, it's so good.
Holy cow.
Yeah. One of the other farms that supports us is Perennial Pastures, another regenerative farm out of San Diego. Our experience with Kevin Munoz, the owner, we had him on the show, a young first generation rancher who's really empowered by this movement of regenerative agriculture and really wants to be a leader in the space. I think our conversation with him was so insightful, just in terms of how mission focused he is and how he really thinks about his farm as a business and wanting it to be here 50, 100 years down the road, even though he's just the first generation of it. And I think just being able to spend time with him out in San Diego was kind of the perfect indication of that, where we got to go have a meal with him at his house, hang out with his wife and kids. Like, what an amazing person. And I think his mission focus around raising really high quality beef and restoring nutrients to the soil is just one of those rare missions that I think everyone can get around.
Yeah, he has such a commitment to really feeding the local community in San Diego, in the San Diego County, first and foremost. But he's also passionate about feeding the community around the country. So I know they've invested a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources to being able to order beef in bulk on their website. So I know that they now offer quarter, half, whole cows directly off the website. They have that great ancestral blend ground beef product. So it actually has organ grinds mixed into the ground beef. So you're getting the benefits of like an ounce or so of organ meat, but because it's in the ground beef, you really can't taste it at all. And I think, to your point, Harry, just another amazing person. You know, Kev was someone that he was following a paleo diet in college and started realizing, wow, when I nourish my body with real foods, I feel amazing. Had a really successful stint in tech, but realized that there was just something else that he was passionate about. So he's one of those rare cases where, you know, he put his money where his mouth is, and he's a first generation farmer, just, you know, bootstrapping this thing, raising money, and just so passionate about feeding the community. Just an amazing guy.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts on organ supplements, and what do you think about the company that supports our podcast, Optimal Carnivore?
Such a good question, man. I think organ meat is something that's gained a ton of notoriety the last few years, and for good reason. I don't want to speak for you, but I think both of us have had a ton of benefits just incorporating organ meats into our diet. I would say that, you know, we definitely prefer the raw source of organs, where we'll just, you know, chop up some liver and some heart, and, you know, there are different ways to prepare it. I think the raw source is the most nutrient dense, but, you know, we're fortunate that there are companies like Optimal Carnivore that exist that freeze dry organ capsules, so you can actually take them on the go. You know, there are a ton of times where we're traveling where we're not going to have access to raw organs. So I can throw a little Ziploc bag together of Optimal Carnivore and be good to go. And I think 6 pills is an ounce of organs, which is like the daily recommended amount that will give you a lot of those really good quality vitamins in there. So that's kind of how I think we've been using it. Did I miss anything there?
No, I think the fact that it just makes organs accessible to people. And I think that organs are generally just a food group that are underutilized when it comes to eating nose to tail. And the nature's vitamin is a perfect name for these organ foods. And I think a lot of people are pretty in the mainstream object to eating organ meats, but when you put it in a pill form that's doesn't taste bad, it's convenient, you can put it in your backpack. It makes things a lot easier. And I also think that just generally these brands are Optimal Carnivore is focused on making people healthier, which is just such a strong mission. And I think liver capsules is a great way to get people thinking about their health differently.
100%. There's probably someone that's listening to this right now and you're interested in organ meats, but the taste might make you a bit squeamish. You feel strange about eating raw foods. Maybe you cook liver and you don't like it. Maybe it has a metallic taste. I think that's also where the organ capsules play such a great role, is that you're still getting that nutrient density, but you're getting it in a very convenient capsule-like format, and it just takes away any of that squeamishness that you might have to the taste. It's just a great product. And also Richard, who runs Optimal Carnivore, he's started listening to the show really early on, and he's built his own organ supply chain and is just doing things the right way and really trying to support the right people in the space. So just proud to be associated with them, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening. Now we're going to go back to the show.
Got it. So when you're working with a client, are you almost giving them like a list of approved foods kind of to serve as their guardrail and like the anchor of their diet, and then trying to work with them to develop that intuitive sense of like what foods and meals make them feel the best, kind of prior, referring to what Harry was talking about?
So I don't necessarily like to give lists of foods of
Okay.
like, this is good and this is bad, but I really like to teach the why behind things. So like in my online program, I have 2 whole lectures on food, and it's basically like nutritional science. So I teach them, here's why red meat is so good for you. Here's why probably everyone should be gluten-free. Like here's the science behind gluten. And like in the late 90s, we changed how we process wheat. So that's why in the US, we probably need to stay away from gluten. If you go to Europe, have at it. Like I went to Italy in 2018. I ate pasta and pizza for every other meal and had wine with all of them, and felt
great.
so good. Yeah, it was great. So really, I like to teach them, here's why I recommend being gluten-free. Here's why I choose to be gluten-free. Here's why I don't do artificial sweeteners, like not even as a like special occasion. Like these are my kind of never things, and just explain the science. And then again, it's like, here's the information. Do with it what you want, and kind of figure out again like what works for you.
Yeah. I mean, when you were in Italy and you said you felt good when you were eating bread and pasta and things like that.
Yeah,
right?
I felt great, but I was in college and having fun, so I was definitely not as healthy as I should have been. But the food there is amazing. I mean, it's fresh,
Yeah.
so like you can enjoy a pizza there and not feel bad about it. It's light, like it's different than like the greasy food that you get here.
Mhm.
But why does the bread and pasta and stuff sit better in Italy? Do you know? Like, is it actually down to like the actual wheat that's being grown there? Do we know?
Yeah. So it's a couple of things. So in the late 90s in the US, we changed how we process wheat. So we did hybridization and something called deamidation. So deamidation made it so that it basically like took the wheat and processes it one step further so it can sit on the shelf for longer. But we have an enzyme in our body that's supposed to do that deamidation process. So when you consume that wheat that's already been deamidized, then your body is like the enzyme looks at the gluten and it's like, you look familiar, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do to you. So then it just latches onto it, and then it ends up entering into your gut. So you have your gut lining, right? And everything's just supposed to pass through, and you're only supposed to absorb certain things through your gut lining. But there's certain cells that are inside of your gut lining that are considered foreign cells, but they're still your body, right? But they only are supposed to stay inside this tube from mouth to butt the whole time you live, right? They're supposed to stay in there. So what happens is you have this wheat coming through. If that enzyme latches onto it and then it gets absorbed into your system, now it's inside of you. It's outside of that tube, inside of your body. And so then that's where we have your immune system then comes in, and it's like, who are you? What are you doing here? Your immune system is going to flag that as an invader. But what your body has now done is your immune system has flagged one of your own cells, because it's your own enzyme that's now entered into your body. So it's a self cell that you have now created an antibody against. And so that's where some autoimmune diseases can come from, because now, and that gluten can also look similar to other things. So it looks like your cerebellum, and it looks like, I can't remember the other, but there's a few other cells in your body that it looks like. So that's why like gluten can cause headaches or like balance disorders, because the antibodies are now targeting your cerebellum. So they're going to start messing with your equilibrium, or like vertigo, for example.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's just one of the, so that's just deamidation. There's also hybridization. There's also like glyphosate that we're spraying it with and the
Totally.
pesticides. So it's this whole like chemical cocktail that has changed the way that we process wheat in the US.
Mm. Do you spend much time talking about gut health and the benefits of a carnivore diet for gut health?
Yeah, it's one of the, I mean, again, it's one of the best things you can do because, like I said, pretty much everyone can absorb red meat really easily. So any sort of inflammation or any problems that you're having going on in your gut, if you just take everything else out and just eat red meat, it's going to help your body calm down. It's going to help that inflammation calm down so that way things can heal. And then again, you can start incorporating other foods and you're probably going to do a lot better with them than you used to because now your gut is healed.
Yeah. Do you ever have clients that will say to you, like, isn't red meat digestible? Like, isn't it not supposed to be digestible just based on like a lot of the dietary misconceptions that we've been taught?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy, all the misconceptions that are out there. And like you were saying too, like most women or a lot of women are plant-based, like especially the advertising towards women of like,
Mhm.
just eat a salad every day and you'll lose weight. And it's
Yeah.
like, actually, if you had a steak for lunch every day, you'd be doing so much better.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
It also just improves your relationship with food when you kind of create the playground that you can play in, and then you're not worried about like numbers in terms of counting calories or making sure
Oh,
like that is so toxic.
yeah.
Like you think we're supposed to be thinking about like every single calorie we're eating? It's
Yeah.
just
Definitely not.
it's energy that's just totally misplaced. I think if we can just focus on what works and kind of eliminate the crap, it makes things so much easier for people.
Yeah. I loathe counting calories.
And it's a shame because I think there's definitely that misconception with women in particular that they need to kind of be like white knuckling their way through the diet or like, oh, I can only eat like 1,500 calories a day or something
Totally.
like that, which is such
Yeah.
a shame because when you're going animal based, you're eating this amazing nutrient dense food. You feel amazing. You don't even calling it a diet is just like not the right word. You're just eating real foods that are evolutionarily consistent to make us feel our best, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I couldn't tell you the last time I counted a calorie.
Which is such an amazing feeling, right? It's like a
Yeah.
sense of freedom. It's
Oh,
like you
yeah.
just live your life and you cook your meals and you eat great food and you feel as well
Mm-hmm.
amazing, which is what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Well, and that's how I feel that's why I try to give women just like the science behind what we're doing, because then again, it creates so much freedom. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be this like, oh, well, Brittany said I could eat this, but I shouldn't eat this. I'm like, no, I'm just going to tell you like what the science or like the general consensus is saying and what we're seeing in people. And then just figure out what makes you feel good.
Yeah.
If you eat this and you feel like crap, don't eat that.
Yeah. And are you getting as granular to be like, hey, you should eat this amount of protein a day or this, you should prioritize saturated fat or get this much fat in? Because I know that that's something that a lot of people in the keto, carnivore, animal based community talk about. Like, do you kind of get granular with the macronutrients like that too with a client?
Nope.
No. Yeah.
Nope. I don't care about that either. But again, that's where the intuitive eating comes in.
Mhm.
So I think our bodies will tell us what we need. So if you know that you should prioritize red meat and not be afraid of saturated fat, so like eat the ribeye, eat the fat off the ribeye, prioritize that, then your body's going to tell you what it needs. I think that's where, yeah, like a lot of the keto community, like, it just sounds exhausting to me. Like,
Yeah.
and they're so like calculating everything. I'm like, that is not healthy.
Yeah. It's almost like we need to ask ourselves the question, what is our goal here with what we're trying to accomplish in terms of fueling ourselves?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
do you want to spend 90% of your mental energy thinking about food, or would you rather spend 10% and then get on with your day and go do other
Totally.
stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, we had on Safe Dean, who wrote the Bitcoin Standard, and he's been a
Okay.
long-term carnivore since 2015, like kind
Oh,
of like a
wow.
purist of like red meat, salt,
Yeah.
water. And I think one of the best things he had said in that show was like, eat meat, drink water, and get on with your life, which is such an interesting mental model about nutrition because that's really what food should be. It's like food is nourishment, and there
Mhm.
shouldn't be a ton of thought into it. It's like you should cook a delicious, satiating meal. You should feel amazing, and then you should be able to just go on and live your life and be the best mom you can be or the best chiropractor. Like we spend so much time just worrying about our food when it's like when you correct those things and nourish your body with the right nutrients, it's like you don't have to put this extra thought or effort into it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also just like way easier to cook too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I can come home and just make a 1 pound ribeye and that's a complete meal. And that's it. It takes me 10 minutes to make.
Yeah.
So simple.
Yeah.
It's kind of unfortunate though that we're in this like structurally like the system itself has now been it's been happening for so long that so many people are dealing with these problems that like, you know, basically everyone, 88% of people are dealing with metabolic syndrome or some form of metabolic unhealth, which is just like, it's honestly startling to think that that is
Mm.
a reality that we're living in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just so many things that we've normalized that are completely crazy.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, it's like we've normalized things that should never be normalized, right? So,
Hmm.
I mean, I feel like I'm probably a broken record, but it's like 70% of the population is overweight or obese. I think 40% of our children are overweight or obese, and like Harry mentioned, 88% of the population is metabolically unhealthy. So I think they're failing at least one of those 5 tests to
Yep.
determine if you're metabolically healthy. So, being sick is the new normal. That's what we've normalized, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're doing what everyone else is doing, if you're having that donut in the office or just going out for pizza or ordering food from DoorDash or Uber Eats, it's like that's going to lead you down the same path that everyone else is in. And we have to be intentional about how we're living and how we're eating.
Yeah. And I see it all the time too in women. Like I'll have women come into my office and I'll ask them about their periods. And they're like, oh, yeah, they're normal. They're fine. I'm like, okay, do you get period cramps? Oh, yeah, the first 2 days, really bad. Like sometimes I'm in bed. I'm like, you just told me your period was normal. That's not normal.
Yeah.
And like, they just think that, oh, it's just part of life. Like everyone gets period cramps.
hmm
Can you describe, this is going to be a dumb guy question, but can you describe what a period should be like?
Yes, that's actually a great question. Honestly, I actually have that in like my notes to like make a post about what is a normal period because yeah, so many people don't even realize. So a normal period would be, well, the normal cycle length is typically 28 days. It can be anywhere from like 28 to like 34-ish days is still going to be considered regular. The biggest thing is if it's regular for that woman. So one woman might have a 28-day cycle every single month. Another woman might have a 32-day cycle. But if she has a 32-day cycle every single month, then that's normal for her. What's not normal is to go 28 to 35 to 27 to 32. Like that's going to be more irregular. So the cycle length should be, that's from day one of your period till you start your period again. So that full 28-day cycle. So it should be about 28 days. The period itself should last anywhere from 3 to 5 days. Less than 3 days is a little bit too light. More than more than 7 days. So it can be anywhere from 3 to 7 days. 5 is kind of the average. Anything more than 7 days would be like irregularly long. And really our periods should be painless, pretty like easy. It is normal to have energy fluctuations throughout our cycle. And women are very bad at honoring those. Well, modern society, I should say, is very bad at honoring those. Some women are, we're figuring it out.
Yeah.
But modern society is created, like the 9-to-5 work job, like all of this is created around men and your cycles because men just have the circadian 24-hour cycle. Every morning you can wake up at 5 a.m. every day and do the same workout at 5 a.m. every day, and that's totally good for you.
Right.
But so it's normal to have fluctuations in your energy, but you should not have like raging PMS, like super, really bad, like mood fluctuations, really intense cravings, all of that would be abnormal. So it's normal to be a little tired going into your period or like wanting to take some rest days when you first start your period. That's totally fine. But if you're feeling exhausted or you're in so much pain that you like can't get out of bed, those are all abnormal.
Got it. Do you think about changing the way that you eat, work out, or just live in general, depending on where you are in that 28-day cycle?
Yeah, so there are ways that you can change how you eat during your cycle. I have a whole lecture about it in my online program. I'll be honest though, I don't practice it very much because again, I just go with my intuition. Like I am just all about what I feel like eating that day. If I'm more hungry, I eat more. If I'm not that hungry, then I don't eat. It's, not that big of a deal. So I know some women will be like more specific about like, oh, I'm going to eat more carbs because I'm ovulating or, that kind of thing. So I do teach women how to do that, but personally, I don't really pay attention to that. But I do very much pay attention to my workouts, even just like work and what I do. Like I try to do more of like my social media, like batch content around ovulation, because that's when you're like, you're feeling good, you're ovulating. That's when you're most fertile. So you want to be like out in the world. You want people to see you. And then during my period, that's when you typically that's when you feel the most creative, and you like receive more downloads. Like the veil is thinner between like you and your intuition. So that's when I'll really get all my ideas. Like I'll brainstorm everything during that part of my cycle.
Interesting. So you actually will feel more creative during your period.
It's wild. Once I started paying
Really?
attention to it, like insane. Like because there was a while where I was like, okay, like I have this day, I'm going to sit down and do a bunch of social media content because I have the time. Right. And I like sat at my desk and I was like scrolling my phone, and I like got a text. I'm like, oh, I got it. I was like not focused. And then 2 weeks later, I was like, oh my gosh, I was like on a hike and I'm like getting my phone out, writing down all these ideas, because the first time I was ovulating, that's not the time to be creative. That's the time to execute and like make the content, but not to be creative. And then that 2 weeks later was when I was on my period, and just got all of these downloads. So it makes a huge difference.
All right, another dumb question. How do you pay attention to these things? Like, what are the tools that you use to start tracking these things and develop that intuition and relationship with what's happening?
Yeah, well, the first is just to educate yourself on like what you should be feeling during your cycles. So again, I educate women on this. I tell them, and you can know what you should feel during each phase of your cycle, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you will feel that way. Maybe some women feel super creative during ovulation, so that's when they're gonna brainstorm all of their ideas. So just know that there's going to be changes, and tracking your cycle is one of the first ways. Like you need to know what day of your cycle you're on, and pay attention to that. So then you can know, and it's helpful too to like maybe keep a journal of like, okay, day 20 of my cycle, today I'm feeling tired. And then you can know, okay, day 2 of my cycle, today I'm feeling creative, whatever it is. So just writing these things down and starting to track will help women start to figure out what is good for them. Like, for example, typically ovulation is a time when it's good to like make videos or be out in the public, right? But for me, when I'm on my period is when I feel most creative. And I actually prefer to just create all my content when I'm feeling creative. So I'll like brainstorm the ideas, and then I'll also create it at that time. And then ovulation, I just kind of like take the time off to just like, I don't know, go have fun or do something else, because I'm just not in that mode of even wanting to create, because I don't have the idea at that moment of like what I want to create. So tracking your cycle, knowing where you're at, and then just figuring out how you feel from there.
It also sounds like you've developed this very intuitive compass that kind of it drives your decisions on like what you eat, how you're going to create, how you're going to live your life. How do you advise women to develop that internal compass over time?
I mean, it takes time.
Yeah, it's a process.
Yeah, exactly. It takes time of like going deep within. I mean, step 1 is definitely tracking your cycle. So there's a ton of different apps you can track your cycle with. There's one called Flow that's really helpful. I like Natural Cycles. That's a paid one because it comes with a thermometer. So that one you can track for knowing where you're at in your cycle, but also using it for like a birth control method, tracking your fertility. So like when you're fertile versus when you're not fertile. And that way you can prevent pregnancy or get pregnant if you want to. So that's one that I use, because then you can also taking your temperature every day helps you to know not only when you're ovulating, but also like when your period's coming. So just paying attention to where you're at in your cycle. And then I really love women just to keep a journal, and it doesn't have to be a lot. Like I'm not a big writer, like a big journaler, but literally just like every day at the end of your day, put, cycle day, whatever, and like 2 words of how you're feeling. And then over time, you can start to get to know like, oh, okay, I'm starting to get into this rhythm where like, yeah, the week leading up to my period, I am feeling really tired. Maybe that's not the time to go to spin class and yoga sculpt and all these crazy workouts.
Right. Maybe this is a good time to dive into the birth control topic, because you mentioned the tracking your fertility cycle, and I was like totally in disbelief when I heard this, that there's certain times that women can't even get pregnant. I didn't know that was a thing. And then you look at what we actually do in terms of promoting birth control, and trying to essentially just make girls at a very young age take a pill to control their fertility. So could you maybe just expand on what you're talking about in terms of tracking fertility? Because I think a lot of people don't even realize that that's an actual way to, prevent childbirth if you don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's wild. So women women can only get pregnant 24 to 48 hours out of every single month.
That's
But
wild.
we pump them with hormones every single day with birth control. Like
That is insane.
what?
Wait, so
Yeah.
only 24 to 48 hours every month?
Yeah, well, that's for the woman. So the woman
Okay.
technically is only fertile 24 to 48 hours. However, sperm can live inside the vagina for up to 5 days.
Okay.
So that's why it's about a 5 to 7 day window that we say like women can technically get pregnant in those like 5 to 7 days, because just in case if there's sperm in there that's, holding on until the
Right.
ovulation comes, it's like, I'm waiting for it.
Delayed release.
Yeah. But once a woman has ovulated, and that egg is gone, then she cannot get pregnant. And that's a big problem though, is you'll see, I see it all the time. I don't know why I do this, but I'll go into the comment section of like when,
Dangerous.
yeah, I know. So like when someone starts talking about natural cycles, for example, the Natural Cycles app, because they're getting really popular. So like I've seen a few big influencers who are like not in the health space, right? They'll talk about natural cycles, and you go into those comments because those are, like the lay people in the comments. They're not the people who are like into, carnivore diet, like all this other crazy stuff that we're into. You go into those comments and it's just like, oh my gosh, all these people are like, oh yeah, good luck with that. Yeah, my friend had 3 babies doing that, or, all this kind of stuff. But here's the thing, if you do it correctly, it has just as much efficacy as a birth control pill, as using condoms, as all of these other birth control methods. But you have to do it correctly. So many people will say, oh yeah, I'm doing, natural family planning or fertility awareness method, and they're not tracking their temperature. They're just like assuming that they ovulate on day 14, maybe keeping track of their period. Like there's so many different ways to kind of go about it and do it wrong that I guarantee you, give me 100 women who say they got pregnant during doing this method, 99 of them were doing it wrong.
Wow.
Or yeah, like not doing it correctly. For example, like I'm taking my temperature. So my last cycle, so typically I have a 28-day cycle, and I've been ovulating very consistently on day 14. My last cycle, I didn't ovulate till like day 17, but then this cycle I ovulated on day 14 again. So if I was just assuming, if I had 3 cycles in a row that I ovulated on day 14, I'm like, oh, day 14, that's fine. Then this cycle where I had, for who knows why, I had ovulated on day 17. So if I assumed, oh, day 14 is my day, then if I had sex on day 16, unprotected sex, but then, oops, I ovulated on day 17 this cycle, because who knows why, then I would have gotten pregnant.
Right.
So that's where like you've got to take your temperature. You've got to look at your cervical mucus. There's like all these different signs that you can figure out what your, like when you ovulate and when your fertile window is. So if you're paying attention to all of those things, you're good. It's 99% effective. Same as birth control. It's 99% effective with perfect use.
So is it something where are you taking your temperature in the morning when you wake up, and that temperature is maybe determining where you are in your cycle?
Yep. So it's your basal body temperature. So you take it first thing in the morning. So yeah, I just like have a thermometer on my nightstand. You put it under your tongue. And also you have to do it first thing when you wake up before you get out of bed. So let's say too, like these women who say that they got pregnant doing this, maybe 5 days out of the month, they wake up and they go to the bathroom and they start making their coffee, and then they're like, oh yeah, my temperature. And then they go and take it, right? That's not going to be as accurate as the woman who rolls over every day, puts it in her mouth, puts a thermometer in her mouth and checks it that way diligently every single day.
Got it.
What's really cool too, though, about Natural Cycles, I'm not affiliated with them. I'm not trying to plug them, but
This is an app?
yeah,
Okay.
it's an app. Yeah. So they also just recently integrated though with the Aura Ring.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so women could also wear the Aura Ring, sync it up with their Natural Cycles app, and then they don't even have to worry about like taking that temperature every day, because it's going to be taken on their ring too. So just other ways to make it more effective. So I kind of forgot what the question was.
No,
How
I
do
was
we
just
track
asking
it?
about like taking your temperature in the morning is like indicative
right,
of where
right.
you are. And then also I think you had mentioned like cervical mucus too is also indicative of where you might be in your cycle.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, your basal body temperature, which you take in the morning. So it'll be fairly consistent, and then it'll spike at ovulation, and that's how you confirm ovulation. And then it'll go back down until you have your cycle again. So you can take your temperature. There's also, you can do an LH test. So LH strips are like an ovulation test. So it's funny too, because a lot of women will be like, oh, I ovulated on this day, like the ovulation test said I did. I'm like, well, that's not really what the ovulation test is not like yes or no.
Hmm.
So again, it's like you have to have this really broad understanding of what's going on, which I think all women should. I mean, like all of this that I'm talking about should be basic sex ed information.
Totally.
And I didn't learn this till I was in my 30s.
Wild.
That's insane.
Like,
Like,
what? Yeah. So you can also take an LH test, which you just like pee on a stick and it tells you if your LH is a hormone, if that's spiked or not. So that will spike 24 to 48 hours before ovulation. So you can do your LH test, your temperature, and then also checking your cervical mucus. So like the discharge that comes out of the vagina, it changes throughout the month based on how fertile you are. So it's more like egg white, like sticky consistency, like a better lube basically when you're fertile, because your body's like, hey, let's get it on,
Yeah.
let's go.
right.
So if you track all of those things together, your failure rate is going to be extremely low.
Can you talk about some of the downsides that you see with birth control? I feel like most people just accept it for what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. It's just one of those things, again, that we've just normalized. And so many women are on it from such a young age. It's insane. And medical doctors will tell you, like, oh, it's fine. Like, it has no side effects, which is just not the truth. So, yeah, birth control depletes a ton of nutrients out of your system. It also, the biggest problem with birth control really is that it's not fixing anything. So a lot of women get put on it because they're having some period issues, and all birth control is doing is just covering up those issues and potentially making them worse because we're not addressing them. So why is she having these hormonal imbalances? Is it a toxic overload? Is it her nutrition? Is it her blood sugar imbalances, right? Something else is going on. So if we just slap birth control on top of it, those things are just left to go, underlying issues. So then when you come off birth control, they're still there. They're probably worse. Because birth control puts you in a postmenopausal state. So a lot of people think it mimics pregnancy. It actually mimics being in menopause.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we're giving that to 14-year-olds?
Yeah. Exactly.
Or younger. I don't know.
Right, exactly. So yeah, women are like going through their whole 20s, like basically their body thinks they're in menopause, and then they want to just come off birth control and be like, oh yeah, I'll just get pregnant. It's like, you're not supposed to get pregnant after going through menopause.
Yeah, again, one of those instances where we're not addressing the root cause at all. It's just reactive, give you a pill, and then just kind of be on with your way. And then when women are trying to get pregnant, it's like you contrast that to like some of these ancestral tribes that are taking months and years to prime and prep their bodies to be able to get pregnant as quickly as possible, versus where like a lot of women seem like they're just kind of getting off the pill and they're trying to get pregnant, they're having difficulties and they don't know why.
Yeah, really, like preparing for pregnancy is this very sacred practice that I hardly know anyone in the Western world who does that. But it's so important, between getting your mineral status up, which that's going to help to prevent morning sickness as well. Like morning sickness and nausea during pregnancy has a ton to do with how much minerals you have in your body at the time. There's so many things you can do to optimize your hormones, optimize your nutrition. I mean, you're about to build another human inside of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is no light feat.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
It's like preparing for war.
Yeah.
So, one thing I did want to ask you is I do think in like the alternative health community, there's definitely just this like almost blanket notion that birth control is terrible for you. And I am curious, are there any instances where birth control could be effective or useful for women?
That's a good question.
And maybe the answer is no, but I'm just curious your take on that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a good question. It's always good to play devil's advocate in that way. Honestly, though, I don't see
From
a
what
scenario.
you've seen,
Yeah,
yeah.
from what I've seen, I just don't see a scenario where it would ever help with anything, really. I mean, okay, I will say, so there are some women who have endometriosis, for example, which is technically what it is when your uterine tissue is growing outside of your uterus. So it can be like on your digestive organs, or like in your other pelvic organs, or just kind of, it's growing everywhere. So then when you're having your period and your uterine tissue is, contracting and expanding and like getting ready for your period, that's happening all throughout their body. So it can cause extreme pain. So some women in that instance, it's like, I understand why they feel like they need the birth control, and I get it. Like, I've had a couple of instances, like I said, like that one when I was 19, where I've experienced those period cramps that you cannot get up off the floor because of them. So in instances like that, I understand why women feel that they need it and are so scared to come off of it. And I think that's also, though, because they've never been taught that you can actually heal those things. There's women who have had endometriosis who have healed from all of the symptoms of endometriosis without having surgery. There is a surgery for it. Well, they'll go in and they'll cut out all of that tissue. It's called an excision surgery, which technically in the Western world is supposed to be the only cure for endometriosis. But I know of a lot of women who have not had the surgery and they've just changed diet and lifestyle and other things, and they've gotten rid of all of their endometriosis symptoms.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are there any holistic types of gynecologists that you know of that will actually work with you to track your cycle and maybe not like blanket prescribe birth control? Or is it like having to work with just someone like you?
Yeah, I wish. Well, okay, so women can go to midwives for like pap smears and like exams and things like that. So, I mean, you could start with a midwife. I don't know if there's many midwives out there who are like coaching on, periods and period health and all that kind of stuff. But it is someone, if you just don't even want to deal with like the medical doctor side of things, you can go to a midwife for just like your well women checks. So that's one thing I encourage a lot of women to do is like, why are we even giving those MDs our money still? You know, like go to a midwife. But yeah, I mean, if there is an MD out there, I don't know, DM me. Like, I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
I think it's mostly just like health coaches and, nutrition coaches and things like that are helping women with these things.
Got it.
Can you speak to your perspective on like the medical side of things, like really like how we've gotten to this understanding of, just like prescribing the pill as opposed to the lifestyle and dietary changes that you could make? Because it feels like we're missing a huge portion of like the upside of just like bringing things back to personal autonomy and trying to change things through lifestyle as opposed to like these shortcuts that have side effects that we just kind of ignore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it comes down to just the same way that kind of all Western medical doctors are there for. Here's the thing, like in America, we are really great at emergency medicine, right? There's nowhere else I'd want to be to like get in a car accident or get shot or, something like that where I need to go to the emergency room for, emergency help. But chronic daily lifestyle medicine type stuff, I mean, I honestly don't even know why people go to medical doctors for this stuff anymore. All they know how to do is prescribe medication.
Yeah.
That's all they're going to do. Like, I don't even know why people have this expectation like, oh, well, I went to my doctor and they just told me to take a muscle relaxer or they told me to take birth control. Or I'm like, yeah, what did you think they were going to tell you?
Yeah. That's what they're trained to do.
Exactly. That's all they're trained to do. And I mean, if you really want to get into it, it goes all the way back to like the early 1900s. And there was the Flexner Report and like the medical schools were basically all bought out by Rockefellers and like
Carnegie.
Yeah. And Carnegie. Exactly. Like they started making these medications that were based on
It's like petroleum.
Yeah.
I think.
Petroleum. Yeah. Like petrol. And they were like, oh, I can make a medication out of this and make so much money. And so then they bought all the medical schools and then they called chiropractors quacks and homeopathies quacks. And, they tried to get rid of us. There was a whole lawsuit in the 70s where the American Medical Association, the AMA, they called it the Committee on Quackery. And they created this committee and their entire purpose was to contain and eliminate the chiropractic profession. That's all their purpose was. So they wanted to, put propaganda out to the community, tell people not to go to chiropractors. Like that was their whole purpose. The chiropractors got wind of this. We sued the AMA and we won. Like we proved that that's what they were doing and we won. It's wild. So yeah. So I mean, medical doctors, that's all they're trained to do. If you like in medical school, they maybe get one class on nutrition if they're lucky.
Yeah.
And all they're trained to do is just prescribe medication. And it honestly was a lot in the same way of my dietetic education. Like I have a little bit more compassion for medical doctors having gone through that because I get it. Because registered dietitians, we are trained very much in the same way as medical doctors in that during school, we are told you're the expert. You are the person who knows nutrition. Everyone else is a complete quack. If someone calls themselves a nutritionist, just forget about it. Like if they're not a registered dietitian, they don't know what they're talking about. So I came out of becoming a registered dietitian and I was like, yeah, like, cool. I'm the expert on nutrition. Like I'm the best. I know everything I need to know. I like poo-pooed like the paleo diet. I was like, that book was written by an exercise physiologist. Like that's complete bullcrap.
Yeah.
And then come to find out a few years later, majority of what I've learned that's actually useful about nutrition, I did not learn from my registered dietitian schooling.
And what are they teaching you? Like 6 to 11 servings of carbs a day, low fat meats, things like that?
Yeah, everything in moderation, the food pyramid.
Calories in, calories out.
Yep, exactly. Yep, all of that stuff. Yeah, I mean, still, I mean, well, I guess I can't say to this day, but when I was in the hospital system, so I became a dietitian 2014. So that's when I did my dietetic internship. I mean, we were still 2014. We're still telling heart attack patients to eat a low-fat diet. It's like that research has been outdated for 30 years,
Yeah,
and that's still what they're teaching in the hospitals.
that's insane.
Yeah.
Is there, do you get pushback with this, your sort of philosophies around what, what you're putting out there in terms of just making lifestyle changes and dietary changes?
Yeah, sometimes I'll get trolls on my Instagram from time to time.
Yeah. But it seems like you just focus on just serving your clients and just trying to make women healthier, and you just focus on the positives of that, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, I just had this conversation yesterday with one of my patients. A lot of us, like chiropractors and all of us, healthcare professionals, right? We get into this field because we want to help people.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the biggest lessons that I have learned, especially in the last 4 years of having my own practice, is there's a lot of people out there who I would love, absolutely love to help. And I know exactly how to help them, but I cannot help people who don't want to help themselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's so many people out there who just don't want to help themselves.
Totally.
So you got to just, all right, I'll be here when you're ready. Block them if you need to on Instagram, if they're
Yeah.
trolling your comments or whatever.
It's probably the perfect segue to talk a little bit about your profession as a Gonstead chiropractor, because you were talking about some of the things that you're seeing with your patients and the benefits that they're getting from it. And it's honestly wild. And I had never heard of it before. So I'd love to just dive into what does that actually mean to be a Gonstead chiropractor, and what should women be thinking about if they're interested in going to one?
Yeah. Yeah. So Gonstead Chiropractors, we are basically the Gonstead technique. It's a technique of chiropractic. So there's a ton of different techniques of chiropractic out there. Gonstead is a very specialized technique, and we focus on being as specific as possible when adjusting the spine. So we only adjust one bone at a time, like per section of your spine. So it'll just be like one bone in your neck, one in your mid back, one in your low back, maybe even less than that, because we are going in and we're going to figure out exactly which bone is causing the problem, adjust that one, and leave everything else alone. So we leave the rest of the body to heal. So it's very different than chiropractors that you might be used to, where you go in and they just kind of, do one of everything. It's the same thing on every person that comes through the door, and, you're on your way. Another big difference between us and other chiropractors is when we adjust the spine, we don't ever rotate it. So I'm never going to lie someone down and twist their neck up side to side to adjust it. Even in the low back, you do that big pretzel thing that people will call it sometimes. We don't do any of that. We adjust the bones based on biomechanics of the spine, and twisting is not very good for your spine. So because of that, because we are so specific with your spine, we tend to see really great results in things that seem kind of crazy. Like I was telling you, I've had women come to me who are having irregular periods or really bad period cramps or things like that. And we've done nothing else but adjust them. I didn't talk to them about diet or supplements or nothing else. I just adjusted them, and her periods came back, or their period cramps went away. And we see these changes in their hormones just from adjusting their spine.
Wow. Period cramps going. Sorry.
That's crazy. I was just going to
Yeah.
say, can you talk about why that is? Because that seems like I'm in disbelief, basically.
Yeah, I know. It's wild. So it comes down to your nervous system. And that's really what we are affecting as chiropractors. So typically when you think of chiropractic, you think of neck pain or back pain. That's honestly the boring stuff to me. I'm back, sure, whatever. I'll fix your back pain. Yeah, I can do that. But the exciting stuff is what we're really dealing with is the nervous system. And this is what really inspired me to become a chiropractor, because I had been exposed to chiropractic when I was younger. Never really thought much of it. I thought you get a massage, get an adjustment, just kind of a whatever, feel good thing.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it's actually a very powerful tool for your health. So your brain and your spinal cord is, your nervous system, and then your nerves go out from your spine. Your nervous system controls every single thing that happens in your body, right? You don't have to, if you get a cut on your arm, you don't have to sit there and be okay, skin cells come here. You don't have to tell your arm how to heal, right? Your body knows what it's doing. And that's because your nervous system is telling it what to do. Same thing, we don't have to think about producing our hormones or, anything like that. Everything that happens in your body happens because your nervous system tells it what to do. So when your nervous system, when your brain is not able to communicate with the rest of your body through your spinal cord. So, for example, if you have a bone that's out of alignment, it's going to create a lot of inflammation there. Same thing, like if you roll your ankle, it gets swollen, it gets hot, it gets inflamed. Same thing happens when you have a misalignment in your spine, just to a smaller degree. Obviously, like a rolled ankle, you can really tell. Sometimes you can't tell when it's in your back because your body is very good at compensating. Very, very good, until it's like the tiniest little thing, literally the straw that broke the camel's back. People will be like, yeah, I just leaned over to pick up a piece of paper and my back threw out.
Yeah.
Leaning over to pick up the piece of paper isn't what did it, but it was years of neglecting, your spinal health that led to that. So if you have a misalignment in your back, it's going to affect that communication between your brain and the rest of your body through your nervous system. So for example, like for women with hormonal issues, I'll see it too, like in a specific area of their spine is what controls their hormones. So I'll notice it in so many of my women. I'll get like readings there. We take x-rays and we do like a nervous scope. There's a few different steps that we take to figure out what is wrong in their spine, but it almost always comes back to like the same area because those are the nerves that control hormones.
Wow. So you'd mentioned some patients have a reduction in period symptoms by getting adjusted the right way. What were some of the other benefits that you would mention too?
Well, so I had one woman, she was on birth control for a long time, and then she came off birth control. She wanted to get pregnant. And her period just never came back. So she came in to start seeing me, and we started adjusting her, and then her period came back.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So this brings me to a question I wanted to ask earlier. How do you track if your period is like gone after taking birth control? Like, does that pose a problem, right? Like if you don't know where you are in the cycle because your period's been gone for so long.
Yeah, it does pose a problem. So
It's like, where do you start? We need is year zero.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's one of those things where I would still get like a tracking app. At least like have it on your phone, or maybe like have a journal or something. It kind of depends on where you are. Like if you were on birth control, because some women can take birth control continuously. So technically you have birth control, you have 3 weeks of like hormone pills and then 1 week of sugar pills, which those sugar pills actually have like a ton of iron in them, which is also like not good for you.
Not good for you at all.
It's crazy. So some doctors will tell women, oh, like you don't have to take those like sugar pills. You can just take it continuously and then you just won't have a period. And women, like, we've normalized it so much that women are just like, oh, that's so great.
They're like
It's so
excited about it.
convenient. Yeah. Like, no, that's not it. So it depends. So like if the woman, let's say the woman was doing birth control continuously, so she was not even having a cycle, if it's been years, since she's had one, and then she's coming off birth control and then like wants to, take control of her hormones again, then it's just one of those things where we just have to kind of watch and wait. So you can't really track your cycle if it's been that long, we have no idea where your body's at in its cycle. So that's where we would take different steps like, diet and supplements. I have like an essential oil protocol as well that I use with women for their hormones. So we would start taking those steps. And if she was worried about getting pregnant, I would just tell her to, use condoms every time because we have no idea.
Right. You don't know.
Yeah, because she could ovulate before her period because you ovulate and then you have your period 2 weeks later. So if you haven't had a period for a long time, you will ovulate before you have your period. So she could ovulate and we wouldn't know it, for 2 weeks.
So you were talking about just overall optimizing hormones. We talked about diet. We talked about birth control. And it seems like some supplementation might also be effective for women too to optimize their hormones.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of whole food supplements.
Yeah.
If you couldn't tell. Yeah. Yeah. So like beef organs are a big one. I want all women taking those, especially if they've been on birth control, because especially like beef liver or like Ancestral Supplements just came out with their like Fem blend too. So like that's a good one too because that has beef liver in it. It's going to help to replenish all of those nutrients that birth control depleted. So that's a big one. Minerals as well. Again, birth control is going to deplete a ton of minerals, especially if they're preparing for pregnancy. Minerals are super important. So I have a mineral supplement that I really like called Mineral Essence. You can also just like make sure you're getting electrolytes, like LMNT or Redmond's, like putting salt in your water even is going to help, all of those things. So let's see it. Beef liver, minerals. And then I also really like supplementing with vitamin E, just to help with all the PUFAs that we're exposed to. It's like, obviously you try to not eat that many PUFAs, but like you're still going to live your life and go to a restaurant sometimes, So, and because we store those too, because those will get stored in our fat tissue. So as you're detoxing from them too, having that vitamin E to help counteract that, I think is super helpful.
Got it. So PUFAs being the vegetable oils that you might be exposed to at a restaurant. So
Mhm.
what is the vitamin E actually doing to combat the PUFAs that you might be ingesting?
Vitamin E, it basically just helps your body to like detox them. It
Okay.
helps, yeah, basically kind of like attaches to them and helps your body like excrete them.
Got it.
Yeah.
You just take that in supplement form.
hmm
All right,
Yeah.
cool.
Are there any good whole food sources of vitamin E that you would recommend?
Well, that's the problem is it's mostly in like nuts and seeds.
Interesting.
So not
Yeah.
really. Yeah.
You mentioned something before we hit record that I thought was incredibly interesting. You mentioned that people kind of wear certain sicknesses or things that they're running into with like a badge of honor.
hmm
And I thought that was a really interesting perspective, where like they're almost taking this like victim approach to their health. And then you also said during our conversation that you can't help people who don't want to be helped. So there's kind of this like interesting balance where it's like people are unhealthy, and I don't know, you've seen them basically come to you and say like they are, it's like part of their identity that they have these problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of the medical model kind of teaches us this, right? It's like, oh, sorry, like you have PCOS, there's no cure. But when a medical doctor tells you that, what that actually means is there's no medication that's going to get rid of this.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you can't heal it. It just means that there's no medication that they can give you that's going to help you with that
Mhm.
condition. So yeah, I mean, I see it all the time. I mean, actually people put it like in their Instagram bio, PCOS warrior, or like endo warrior. And I'm like, wow, like way to hold on to that for the rest of your life, like it's crazy. So yeah, so a lot of women will come to me and they're like, "Oh, well, can I still do your program? Like if I have PCOS or if I have endometriosis or if I have this or I have that." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't care what you have." And that's a lot of women too will ask me like, "Oh, do I need to have blood work done or should I get a diagnosis?" And I'm like, "No, I'd actually prefer you not get a diagnosis because it's honestly probably just going to mess with your head."
Right.
Because again, I've had women come to me and go through my program or I started adjusting them. Actually, I had one woman, I'm trying to think. I feel like all I did was adjust her. She probably did some lifestyle style changes on her own, but all we did was adjust her. And she had a diagnosis of PCOS and then went back to her medical doctor a few months later and no signs of it.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's crazy.
I really loved what you said about some of these diseases or illnesses. Autoimmunity, it's labeled as incurable because there's not actually a medication that will make it curable, which is such an interesting way to think about it because I've had ulcerative colitis for about 6 years, and that is exactly what I had been told is that it was, incurable, and they have medication and biologics and things that they can put you on that will suppress the symptoms, but there's still a risk that it could potentially come back. And since I've kind of dove down this path of like preventative medicine through carnivore and animal-based diets, like I haven't seen a return to my symptoms and I've been medication free. So, I mean, I would not know doctor, but I would say that I'm effectively cured because I haven't had a flare up in over 6 years,
hmm
but I'm still
When
told that it's incurable.
and when you
Which is
started
interesting.
sharing your story, the reaction to people within that community was very much this like identity where they were almost like that's
Yeah.
impossible, like you can't do
Totally.
that, right?
Yeah, I was in a Facebook group for patients with colitis and Crohn's that were on Remicade, which is a very particular biologic that you
Mhm.
take. And I had shared a thread that I wrote on Twitter just talking about how I holistically treated and had success with a carnivore diet. And so I was like, oh, this is great. Like I've gotten off Remicade. This drug costs so much money. Why don't I share it in this group of 3,000 plus people that are on Remicade and probably don't want to be dependent on a drug? And
Yeah.
I got so much negative backlash for that. People saying like, "Oh, you're going to get sick again. This is quackery. You're probably like trying to sell a carnivore diet." And I had posted this back in January, just trying to help people. But it was really interesting. That's actually a good point because that perfectly ties back to what you were saying about victim mentality or identity around a disease or an illness or something like that.
Yeah. It's amazing how much people want to fight for their illness.
Yeah.
Like,
Because it's become part of their like struggle and part of their like human experience of
yeah.
whatever they're dealing with.
Yeah. Like, how do you read that if you're in that Facebook group? How do you not read that and be like, oh my gosh, I could cure this. Like,
Yeah.
that could be me.
100%. And
But
it's crazy. And it's a type of drug where you're on it every 8 weeks. You have to get it every 8 weeks
Yeah.
to for it to be effective. Apparently that's what you're told.
yeah.
And it's 50,000 per infusion. So it's like
Oh my
over
gosh.
400K a year.
Yeah.
Why would you want to be dependent on a drug like that?
Right.
But I don't know, there's probably a fear component to it. They probably are working with a GI that's not holistic, right? No, our GIs aren't, no, there was no, I love my GI, but he's not talking to me about a carnivore diet. He's not really talking to me about diet and lifestyle. So it's just this kind of, it's this weird cycle.
Yeah. Well, and it's crazy too. I think one of the easiest ways to, one of the most logical things you can look at is when we look at tribal people, like people who are living in Africa, still living their tribal ways, like the Maasai. I can't remember the name of the other one, but like Brian Sanders went and visited them last year, a couple years ago. And they have, like, they talked to the women there. It's when he went there with Mary. I forget her last name, but I remember like they did a podcast episode about it. And she was talking about, she was asking them like, oh, like, do you guys get period cramps? Or, you know, like they didn't know what she was talking about. They're like,
Really?
what? Like they didn't even, they couldn't understand the question of like period cramps or endometriosis or irregular cycles or like infertility.
Yeah.
I don't even think they knew about like pain in childbirth. Like,
Yeah.
and so it's like you look at these people and it's like they have none of our modern diseases that we have over there. I guarantee you there's no one with ulcerative colitis over there
Absolutely
either.
not. Yeah. It's like sleep, reproduction, like these very basic things that all animals and even like ancestral tribes just know how to intuitively do.
Mm-hmm.
Western society, it's like we struggle with all these things. It's
Yeah.
like everyone's having issues going to the bathroom. People are having issues getting pregnant, having children, and we don't know how to sleep. It's like these very basic functions we've just ruined through these like Western inputs, these modern inputs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have like the canary in the coal mine, which is basically like fertility rates now are just plummeting. It's like, what other sign of health is there other that's, you know, vital for our existence as a species
Mm-hmm.
than fertility?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I was just going to add, like, it really, you reminded me of this, Brett, like, it speaks to like the work of Weston A. Price, just being able to see how these ancestral tribes have been able to survive and live perfectly healthy lives without any, you know, Western foods, without Western medicine, and they're healthy, live, you know, basically until they're you know, 70, 80 years old, and then they're fully healthy and active until like late into their life. But now we have all these diseases that seem like they've been here forever, but they're really just kind of a modern phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking hormone health, and I just want to make sure that we're rounding this out too. So diet, mineral supplementation, birth
Mhm.
control. Are there any other like bells and whistles or like a cherry on top thing that you like to talk to clients about to like get their hormones to that next level?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a few things. Detox, like really being able to detox is one of the really important things. So our liver is one of the main controllers of like, you know, regulating our hormones, you know, detoxing excess estrogen and all of those sorts of things. So I also like to incorporate different things like coffee enemas. Some people get freaked out by. But that's really, really good for just stimulating your liver, like helping with liver health, sweating, you know, just like making sure that you're able to like poop every day, that you sweat at least a few times a week, that you're able to sweat. That's something that I didn't even learn was a thing until recently. Like some people are like literally so sick and toxic, they can't sweat. Like they
Wow.
cannot physically sweat. Yeah.
What's causing that?
It's a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah. That's a whole other podcast. But yeah, I mean, it's wild. It's like you want to make sure you have the ability to sweat, that you're taking all of these steps just to just keep everything, you know, clean and kind of flushed out, especially if you're a woman that's ever been on birth control. If you've ever been on birth control in your life, like you need to take steps to really just like care for and nourish your body and bring it back to health. Even if it was 10 years ago that you were on it, there's still steps you can take today to help with that. So like I'm a big fan of coffee enemas, getting really good sweats in. Yoni steams are another one that you can do. So it's literally like steaming your vagina. So you put like herbs and stuff in a pot and you just like put it, like I put mine under my squatty potty, and then you just like put a blanket around you and just like sit over top of it.
I didn't even know steaming your vagina was a thing.
I know. I told you, I'm really like, I'll talk about any of this.
Whole new
And
world.
I honestly, I think it's so important for us to talk to men about these things.
Totally.
And for like, it's not weird and gross. And it's like, the more that you guys are aware of it, the more that you can help other women be aware of it too. You know, I
Totally.
mean, I've had a woman come to me and she was like, I don't know, like my boyfriend's really freaked out. He really wants me to be on birth control. And like, he just doesn't believe that like we can't get pregnant. And I'm like, are you going to wreck your hormones because he's ignorant and he's not willing to educate himself about your body?
100%.
You know, it's so important for just all of us to know these things.
Definitely.
But yeah, so steams are really good because they basically just encourage blood flow to the area. So I know a lot of women too who have just incorporated yoni steams into their life and their period cramps go away.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, it's supporting your body's natural detox pathways. And that's where like supporting your liver health, making sure you're sweating, doing things like yoni steams, which stimulates blood flow to those organs. All of these things, again, are just going to help your body do what it knows how to do. And that's at the end of the day, our body has the blueprints for health and our body knows how to be healthy. All we have to do is give it the right tools. For example, that's why getting adjusted works, because it just allows your nervous system to operate the way that it's supposed to operate.
I have to say, I've actually been surprised that you've used the word detox, but didn't really mention all that much about food, where I feel like a lot of people think of like a juice cleanse as like the conventional detox.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do, like in my program, I do have like a detox where it's like you take some supplements and it's like kind of a colon, like liver cleanse detox program. But I mean, that's such a small piece of it, you know, like you're saying, like detox is more so what we do every single day, pooping every day, sweating multiple days a week. You know, like those are the detox things that are really going to last a really long time. Yes, you can do like a 30-day detox and that's fine, but we've got to like make it part of your lifestyle.
Do you get into fasting ever with any of your like protocol?
No, I actually am not a huge fan of fasting for women.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, fasting is one of those things where it allows you to like run on stress hormones. So again, men can really get away with this. You know, like you guys again have a lot more leeway, but for women, so if cortisol spikes, cortisol will eat up our progesterone. Progesterone is one of the main hormones that we need in order to get pregnant, to prevent PMS, to help prevent period cramps. Like progesterone is one of those big ones that we need, and cortisol eats away at progesterone. So that's why things like stress can affect your health so much, because those stress hormones, you know, get in there and they just wreak havoc on your body. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of fasting for women because we need as much progesterone as we can get, and especially because we're in such an estrogen dominant society now with between soy and microplastics and just all of these things that are making us very estrogen dominant, that's also going to have an effect on our progesterone. So anything we can do to help preserve the progesterone that we have is going to be helpful.
So women running on cortisol through fasting is not a good thing.
Right. Yep, because it'll eat up their progesterone, which we don't want. I think sometimes things like a prolonged fast, like I think it's a 3-day fast, can like completely rewrite your immune system. You know, things like that maybe you're going to do like once a year or something. I think that can have a benefit, but I'm not a fan of women like everyday intermittent fasting kind of a thing.
Yeah. It can turn unhealthy too, like pretty quickly if like that's something that's like you're saying, like women are just way different than men with their cycles. And if you're doing that sort of thing on a regular basis, like you're zapping these vital fertility hormones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we just have this incredible intrinsic blueprint and like we know intuitively what we need to do to be healthy, but we just can't like get out of our own way almost.
Yeah.
I feel like that's really what I've taken from this conversation is just like, especially as a woman, just like controlling these inputs and the controllables and like literally allowing your body to thrive and be healthy and fertile. And it's like, that's what we were born to actually be able to do, but we're just getting in our own way and preventing against that.
Yeah. Yeah. We're thinking way too hard about it.
Seriously. It has to be an amazingly empowering feeling, like having this perspective and helping other people really figure it out for themselves and build that intuition. It must be like a very fulfilling line of work that you're doing.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things. I've honestly started just like shifting all the like men who come into the office. I'm like, yeah, you can go see the other doctor who I have in the office. I'm like, I just want to see women, like women and babies. That's all, like they're the most fun to help because we can make such big changes with them, you know?
Yeah,
totally.
It's crazy.
Yeah, well, you're doing unbelievable work and just very appreciative of you coming in. I mean, I know we both have learned a tremendous amount from this conversation. We're excited to release the episode and just really appreciative of all the work that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. I'm stoked to be here. Anytime we can talk about hormones, especially with men and like get men in this conversation, I'm all for it.
Totally.
Love it.
We need to open up the combo.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thanks, Brittney.
Yeah.